When the going gets tough, the tough get going. A well-known phrase that could easily be applied to almost every survival situation. Unfortunately, when it really comes down to it, those who would like to get going can't wait around for anyone else. And that can be tough stuff. Though in this case, it was more like tough shit. Welcome to Marooned, harrowing tales of the catastrophically lost. I'm Jack Luna. This is Aaron Habel.
22-year-old Yossi Ghinsberg had always dreamed of being an adventurer. After leaving the Israeli Navy, he had backpacked and hitchhiked his way to Bolivia with hopes to journey into the Amazon. During his travels, Yossi met 39-year-old Marcus Stamm, a schoolteacher from Switzerland, and they quickly became friends, deciding to continue their travels together. Marcus had been traveling with his longtime girlfriend, but they had broken up along the way. It seems a lot can be learned about people and relationships through the trials of travel. Together, Yossi and Marcus traveled to the Bolivian capital of La Paz, where they met Karl Ruprechter, a mysterious, enigmatic Austrian claiming to be a geologist, well-versed in the secrets of the Amazon.
Karl told the pair he was headed to the Amazon in search of gold in a remote village, and he encouraged Yossi and Marcus to join him. He told them stories of ancient villages filled with riches. Yossi, along the way, had recruited another man, 29-year-old Kevin Gale, an amateur photographer from Oregon he had met in La Paz, to join them on their expedition. Kevin had hoped to have his photos published in National Geographic and was eager to explore the remote villages and untouched rainforest. Under Karl's leadership and experience, the ragtag group planned their expedition into the uncharted regions of the Bolivian jungle.
And I'll say this, if you're thinking about going to the jungle, having that idea of riches just waiting for you, that will tip you over. You're headed there, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, that makes it... I mean, the idea of just walking through a jungle, getting bitten by tons of mosquitoes and tangled up in the brush and possibly eaten by a jaguar doesn't appeal to me, but if there's riches at the end of it, it's like an Indiana Jones thing.
Yeah, I mean, you can grab your riches and, swing your way away from the jaguar, but,
Exactly, man.
I don't know. I just picture going into the mouth of the jaguar.
Yeah, right into it.
After spending some time together and making plans for their expedition, the four men flew north to the small town of Apolo La Paz, and then traveled down to the Tuichi River to a local village. There they gathered some supplies and studied their route. While staying in the small village, they received many warnings from concerned locals not to enter the uncharted jungle. Of course, dismissing the locals' concerns, the group ventured forth in search of gold and the hidden village Karl had promised to find deep within the rainforest. Initially, morale was high. The men took in the sights and the sounds of the rainforest. It didn't take long before the reality of hiking through the jungle caught up with them, though. The swarms of insects, mosquitoes were particularly bad and worried the men that they could contract malaria. Then there was the humidity and rain, keeping them and their gear constantly damp. The going is difficult. Between the tangles of the jungle and the ground being a muddy mess, the weather overall is miserable, switching from torrential downpours to relentless blazing heat.
The group risked wading across swift-moving streams while predators watched from the cover of the dense jungle. Venomous snakes camouflaged themselves amongst the trees. The Amazon is not a place for the inexperienced traveler. Despite this, they pushed on and were able to find positive experiences during their hike. They knew the journey would be one of character development. They would have to be physically and mentally tough, but that was the point of the whole thing. They knew what they were getting into. They did stop now and then to admire the birds and plants they had never seen before, Kevin snapping some photos along the way. The three men relied heavily on Karl's expertise and knowledge of the jungle. They would fish in the rivers, but it wasn't easy to catch anything, and they had to be mindful of the caimans lurking in the shadows. They didn't bring much food with them. Karl insisted there would be plenty of game to hunt along the route. It would be foolish to pack and carry so many supplies in with them. All they had was some rice, beans, and salt. The fish supplemented the majority of their diet as well as some fruit and edible plants Karl was able to identify.
After days of hiking through the thick undergrowth and over difficult terrain, tensions began to rise. The men are getting hungry and tired of the rice and beans. Karl makes good on his claim of hunting for game in the jungle and shoots a monkey out of a tree bringing a murderous gleam into his eyes that the men are disturbed by. Breaking down and cooking the primate feels like preparing a human being for consumption. Marcus, the heartbroken Swiss schoolteacher, is horrified by the gruesome scene and refuses to eat. This only increases the tension amongst the men. They argue Marcus knew they would be hunting wild game, and they wouldn't be held back by his unwillingness to adapt. Still, he refuses. As a result, his strength begins to weaken as the days pass.
Originally, their mysterious leader Carl had marketed this excursion as a week-long trek, but it turns out he may have oversold his orienteering skills and knowledge of the jungle. The group are making slow progress, and they're approaching their 10th day in the uncharted wilderness. While hiking in his consistently wet boots, Marcus, the Swiss man who's a schoolteacher, he develops painful sores and trench foot. Every step is a struggle for Marcus, and he's having trouble keeping up with the group. There is no way he can continue like this. The group decide to abandon their quest and return to the small village of Asai. They're disappointed that they weren't able to reach the elusive village of gold, but once back in Asai, Carl devises a new plan. They would forget about the village and instead travel by raft to a small gold quarry called Playa.
It would take about a week by raft to reach the point Carl had marked on the map where the gold quarry should be located on the bank of the river. From there, they would continue traveling by raft to the small village of San Jose before eventually returning to La Paz. Still eager for adventure, the group again put their faith in Carl and agreed to the new plan. With the help of local villagers, they construct a raft and once again leave civilization behind. Once on the water, it quickly becomes obvious that Carl, despite hyping himself up as the experienced outdoorsman and wilderness guide, doesn't know anything about traveling on a raft. He's unable to steer and instead frantically shouts orders at the others. He also lets everyone know that he doesn't know how to swim. Perfect. After 2 intense days on the river, Carl tells the group that they're close to a canyon and a waterfall. They'll have to continue on foot for a while. Initially, they all agree to hike around the falls and build a new raft before continuing downriver towards Playa, located along the riverbed.
But after his display of incompetence on the raft, Yossi and Kevin are growing skeptical of Carl. As the men begin to argue, it comes out that Carl isn't actually an expert geologist, and his credibility takes another hit. Kevin, the photographer, pushes back. He believes the fastest way back to civilization would be to stay on the river, ignoring Carl's warnings. They're willing to continue without him, if that's what it takes. Carl warns Kevin, the photographer, that if he wants to live, he shouldn't try to continue downriver without their fearless leader, Carl, here. During the arguments, the suffering schoolteacher Marcus chooses to stay with the questionable Carl. Carl states it will take them a week to reach the closest village and return to Apollo. Initially, Yossi wanted the group to remain together, but he chose to leave Marcus with Carl and stuck with Kevin. The reason he did this, obviously, is because Marcus is kind of slowing them down, having difficulty, and as we're explaining, Carl's being a big pain in the ass. They all agree to meet up again in La Paz, Bolivia.
Yeah, the way I took it was there's this doubt about Carl now that
Yep.
Yossi has. And Kevin has the same problem. But Marcus is probably thinking, I don't know, Yossi definitely doesn't know,
Mm-hmm.
but Carl says he does know.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think that's why Marcus is sticking with him.
Yep.
If Marcus had said, I'll go with you, Yossi and Kevin, then I think he could have. But they're
Yeah.
splitting up. There are doubts here. And also, just like any other place or time, when leadership is questioned, you'll have people who still support the leader, whoever
Mm-hmm.
was designated leader in the beginning. But in this case, you have a revolt. You have people who are going, you know what? We found enough about you. We don't believe you anymore.
Yeah, and Marcus really has to weigh his options carefully here because he's suffering with the trench foot. He's having trouble keeping up. So he's like, I'm going to stay with the most experienced one, who seems to be the most experienced one in the group, as you said. And to him, he's going to bet on Carl. And Kevin and Yossi are like, well, good luck. We're going to take our chances ourselves. It's getting a little desperate here, obviously.
Yeah, I really believe that Yossi and Kevin didn't make this decision lightly. It's
Yeah,
just when you hear the third or fourth truth come out,
yeah.
there's a point where you just say, you know what? We could all say, okay, yeah, we chose him as the leader, but now, like, we're at risk even with him. I'd rather, we make different decisions now.
Yeah, and Aaron, I mean, niceties go out the window on like day 3 without proper food and going
Yeah.
through the jungle,
Yep.
right? Like I said in the beginning, it's like tough. It's like the going gets tough, the tough get going. It's like, well, if you're not gonna, if we can't work together here, then let's work apart. Forget it. Bye.
Yeah.
Later.
It's actually a legitimate reason.
Hmm.
So the decision is made. Yossi and Kevin will return to the river despite Carl's objections, leaving Marcus and Carl to find their own way. They take the map and some other supplies. Marcus and Carl will remain on land, continuing on foot towards a village. Carl insists it should only take them about a week to hike out. Yossi and Kevin return to the river feeling reinvigorated. Without Carl screaming at them and Marcus slowing them down, the ride down the river is quite enjoyable. That is, until the river begins to narrow and the current increases. They indeed meet the canyon and rapids Carl had warned them about. Yossi and Kevin are barely able to hang on to their makeshift raft as it careens out of control. The rock outcroppings lining the banks jut out into the river, and with no way to effectively steer around them, the raft crashes and jams up against the rocks, whitewater rushing around them. Kevin and Yossi are thrown into the rapids. Kevin manages to swim to shore. Yossi, however, loses his battle against the current and is quickly sucked under and whisked away by the fast-moving river, followed by the raft. Downriver, a waterfall plunges into a deep canyon, and there is nothing Yossi can do to avoid going over. And here's the irony. They
Yeah.
thought they were making their best decision by saying, Carl, you
Yeah.
go your own way.
Yeah.
And then the very thing he warned them about happens.
Yeah. Carl's like up on a mountain ledge somewhere. How's that going for you down there, boys?
Yeah.
Like, but I'm joking because they're gonna be fine here. So Kevin, he watches from the shore as this happens to Yossi, but there's nothing he can do. The river had turned into a whirlpool, and even though he considers himself a strong swimmer, he's no match for the currents. After several harrowing minutes, Yossi emerges from the river relatively unscathed despite being half drowned. The river has carried him nearly 2 miles from Kevin, and after catching his breath, he stands, knowing he needs to head back upriver to find Kevin. Night begins to fall, and Kevin and Yossi spend the night alone, separated from each other, which must be terrifying, Aaron. I mean, I've been in dark woods before, and I can't stand it for very long without a flashlight. It's just being in the dark's freaking scary, all right? I mean, people make fun of you for being afraid of the dark, but it's super scary, man.
Well,
Especially
it's
out
way
in the
worse when
woods.
you're in a jungle versus
Yeah,
the
no,
woods, too.
yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
You have a lot more friends around you at night. Friends are in quotes, by the way.
So the next morning, both men continue their search for each other after it must be a harrowing night. Kevin, he's walking down the river, and Yossi's traveling up the river, trying to find each other. As Yossi is walking upriver, he hears a metallic clanging sound. It's their pack floating near the shore, trapped behind a rock. It's floating in a small pool there. Kevin had tied 2 empty tins to the pack, and Yossi can't believe his good fortune. He picked the right travel partner, it seems, in this instance. The bag contains vital supplies, a flashlight, the map, some rice, and a poncho. Meanwhile, after another day of searching for Yossi, Kevin comes across the impassable canyon wall. He doesn't want to go back into the river, so he leaves the river's edge and decides to hike back into the forest and around the bluff.
What Kevin doesn't know is that he and Yossi had missed each other days prior. Yossi had continued walking upriver, not very far away from Kevin, but neither man had heard each other calling out and continued to search for each other for days, all while getting further away from each other. Kevin has lost the majority of his supplies to the river, but still has his machete strapped to his hip. He searches nests for eggs to eat and is able to dispatch some small animals he comes across, but it isn't enough to keep his stamina up, and he is growing weak. His feet, like Marcus's, are now covered in sores and cuts from missteps over sharp rocks. Once again, he looks to the river.
Kevin's mindset switches from searching for his friend to his own survival. In his weakened state, he won't last much longer. His only choice is to get back into the river and float downstream, back to civilization. Remember, Yossi's the one With the supplies now, Kevin has nothing. So he has no strength to build another raft, and Kevin instead opts to cling to a fallen log and float down the river this way, praying he'll come across a village or someone traveling along the river. Kevin drifts for hours. He hasn't eaten for days, and it's all he could do to continue clinging to the log. As he lifts his head, he spots two men walking on shore, one man holding a rifle. He can't be sure if he is hallucinating or not, but he waves, managing to get the men's attention. He shouts in Spanish, "Help me, help me. I can't walk, and I'm lost."
The startled hunters quickly grab the log and pull Kevin out of the river. They turn out to be two indigenous hunters who were actually from the village of San Jose, the very village Kevin and his friends had originally been searching for. They go on to tell Kevin they only come out this way twice a year to hunt, and he's very lucky to have been found. After returning with Kevin to their village, he is given food and water and slowly regains some of his strength. He informs the people of the village that his friend is still out there and he needs help searching for him. They take Kevin to the closest Bolivian army air base where he is met with skeptical soldiers. They believe Yossi will never be found. It's very likely he's already long dead. They're reluctant to initiate a search and encourage Kevin to return home to his family. But Kevin is persistent and finally gets them to agree to do a flyover of the area.
Yeah, they've just met Yossi and Kevin, but Kevin's turning out to be a good friend here, a really good friend. So after boarding the plane, Kevin instructs the pilot to follow the river and gives them as much detail as he can regarding their route. To Kevin's frustration, the pilot flies 100 feet above the canopy and refuses to go any lower. It would be impossible to spot Yossi from this distance, and to make matters worse, they're not even following the curve of the river, just flying in a straight line. Kevin's attempts to find Yossi yield no sign of his missing friend. But Kevin doesn't give up. He continues to recruit locals to help him search, refusing to believe Yossi is a lost cause. Kevin makes his way to the consulate office and requests help finding his missing companions. He gives descriptions of Yossi, Marcus, and Carl. Carl is actually a known criminal and scam artist wanted by Interpol. Kevin returns to the village of San Jose, refusing to give up the search for Yossi, but thinking that maybe Marcus and Carl are now doomed, at least Marcus being in the company of a known criminal here.
Yossi is in fact alive. He continues to wander upriver, still searching for Kevin. He's convinced he'll come across him any moment. The days pass and the nights come. It's now his sixth night alone in the jungle. Yossi has a lighter in his pack, but no way to start a fire. Everything around him is wet. He wears his plastic poncho and does his best to stay warm while attempting to drift off to sleep. At night, the barks and calls of the forest do little to put Yossi at ease. Leaves shuffle and twigs snap. And that's just something, Luna, that I can't deal with.
No, me neither.
You're hearing these sounds and you can't assign a creature to each one of them. So that leaves your imagination to fill in what the hell that just was.
Yeah.
What broke that twig? What made that guttural sound that suddenly popped out of nowhere? Yeah.
Things that, like, when you're in your house, like the things that go bump in the night, right? You can go walk around with a baseball bat and check it out, but the jungle, who knows where it came from? You're never going to figure out what that was.
Well, and if you do find out, you might regret where you are.
Yeah.
The overwhelming darkness kept his anxiety high. After finally falling asleep, Yossi wakes with the sense that he's being watched. He shines his flashlight around only to illuminate the face of a curious jaguar, contemplating its next meal. Yossi quickly reaches into his pack and pulls out his lighter and a small can of bug spray. He flicks the lighter and ignites a blast of bug spray, creating a flamethrower, and directs it towards the lurking predator. It works, and the jaguar turns and disappears back into the jungle.
I should make a movie out of this, man.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
I love how you said that.
So when the sun rises the next morning, Yossi is becoming convinced that something happened to Kevin and he's probably dead. Yossi studies the map and decides to continue to follow the river to make it to the village of San Jose. Each passing day is a struggle to survive. Yossi navigates through the dense vegetation and forages for edible plants and fruit along the way, but he has limited knowledge of what's edible. He occasionally stops to attempt to fish, but it's difficult, and he's only able to catch a few small fish. He rations his remaining rice, but it won't last long. The days turn into weeks, each day blurring into the next, with very little food and the profound sense of isolation and loneliness. Yossi, he begins to hallucinate at this point. A woman follows him. She never speaks, but Yossi has conversations with her, and it helps. He even creates a spot for her to sleep when he sets up his makeshift camps each night. He knows his sanity is eroding.
While resting in his camp, Yossi feels a sting on his leg, and then another and another. Suddenly, he's engulfed by fiery stingers. He's disturbed a colony of fire ants, and they're crawling all over him, stinging him relentlessly. When he gathers his wits, he can see the ground is a writhing mass of ants. He scrambles away, slapping at his body, trying to get the insects off. They ravage his body, and he's bleeding everywhere. Yossi crawls away from the colony through the mud. Despite his suffering, Yossi is determined to reach Playa. It's the last location he and Kevin discussed, and maybe Kevin would be there waiting for him. As he trudges through the jungle, he's begun to develop a fungus infection on his hands and feet. Like Marcus, he's suffering from painful sores, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to continue forward. Turns out, it really does hurt. Marcus hadn't been exaggerating.
Yossi notices a notch cut into a tree. It's obvious to him that a trail had been marked here. He thinks it could have been Kevin and decides to abandon the river and follow the trail. As he walks, he notes a fresh boot print in the mud. He must be close to some sort of civilization. Feeling some adrenaline, he pushes onward and comes across another print in the mud, only this time he stops short. That's not Kevin's print. It's actually Yossi's own print. He realizes he's been walking in circles. And again, I was joking about there should be a movie about this. There is a movie about this, right, Aaron?
Well, yeah, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, it's custom made, this story for the big screen. There's an intense wave of defeat that washes over Yossi. To this point, he'd been incredibly resilient, and despite his sudden doubt, Yossi, he attempts to find his way back to the river's edge after finding his own boot print and realizing he's walking in circles. He's vowing to himself not to leave the river again. As Yossi nears the river, he decides to stop for the night. The rain is starting again. Yossi situates himself under some leaves and hunkers down for another night of torrential rain. This night, the rain isn't letting up, and before he knows it, he's caught up in a flash flood. The river rises and the jungle begins flooding around him. Yossi, remember, is in pitch blackness. He struggles against the rising waters, trying to grab onto anything to keep from being washed away deeper into the jungle. He manages to climb to some tree roots and hangs on for his life. Eventually, the chaos closes down. He survived yet another drowning scare.
When the waters recede, Yossi finds himself washed away from the river. Despite nearly drowning again, he somehow finds the strength to make his way back to the river, determined to continue on. On the 17th day alone in the rainforest, Yossi hears the drone of a plane overhead. He's weak, feverish, but he uses his remaining strength to call out. It's pointless, though. The dense canopy is covering up any chance of him being spotted from the sky. He believes it's Kevin sending out a search party, but it's no use. He collapses in despair as the plane fades away. It's got to be very frustrating because it's not like you can just run 100 yards and you're out of the canopy. The canopy is everywhere.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
As he sits on the riverbank, he looks around and to his disbelief realizes that he's made it to the old gold quarry, Playa. He'd trade any of the treasure potentially here for a peanut butter sandwich.
Yeah, isn't that the way it is? So, back in the village, Kevin has met a local man named Tico. Tico has a boat and agrees to take Kevin upriver to search for his friend. Kevin's relentless here, Aaron, and it's very admirable the way he's hanging in and looking for his friend. I mean, he was in rough shape after his ordeal himself, but he's relentless. So Tico tells him, "I've got 3 days free, and but that's it. So I'll give you 3 days of my time. After that, they'll have to return back to Tico's village." Kevin graciously takes Tico's offer, and they begin traveling upriver, scanning the shore for any sign of Yossi. At the same time, local guides and villagers help search the forests and follow the routes Yossi may have taken. Kevin and Tico travel up the Tuichi River in search of Yossi for 3 days. After finding no sign of Yossi, it gets to the point where Tico tells Kevin they have to turn around and return to the village.
Yeah, that's a tough call. For anyone who's ever searched for a missing person,
Mm,
there comes a point at times where your own health, your own life is at risk.
yeah.
And you have to maintain your health because you're going to have to go back out and search again, potentially, what have you. There's
Mhm.
nothing worse than you hear these stories of someone that, is lost in the waters and a bunch of other people jump in and then you lose more people doing that.
Right.
But that's the nature of many people, our humanity. We want to reach out and we want to save somebody. We'd hate to see them lost right in front of us.
Mhm.
Yossi lies on the muddy riverbank of the Curry Playa. He hears what he believes to be a bee or a wasp buzzing around him. He raises his hand to shoo the insect away. As he opens his eyes and raises his head, he can make out the silhouettes of people on the river. The buzzing sound? It's not a bee, it's a boat engine. Yossi raises himself up onto his feet just as the shapes in the boat notice him. Kevin jumps from the boat and rushes over to his friend. Can't believe he's found him alive. Yossi collapses into his arms. Kevin and Tico get Yossi situated in the boat and give him some food and water as they return to the village. Yossi is near death. Had he not been able to make his way to the Curry Playa, they never would have found him in time. It's been 20 days since Yossi and Kevin abandoned Marcus and Carl, and there's been no word from either of those men. They are presumed dead. Marcus was likely deceased, considering his health and what's now known about Carl. Yossi's rescue is just the beginning of his slow journey to recovery. He stayed in the village for a few days to receive immediate medical attention, stabilizing his condition before being taken to the closest hospital. There, he spent the next 3 months being treated for exposure, malnutrition, and his various infections.
With Yossi in hospital, Kevin returns to the rainforest to search for Marcus and Carl with the local guides and villagers and an additional search team of soldiers, but they were unable to find any sign of Marcus or Carl, and the two men were never heard from again. The soldiers state that Carl was a known treasure hunter and troublemaker, and this wasn't the first time he'd led unsuspecting tourists into the jungle. And I gotta say here, Aaron, it's not surprising they never found any trace of them. In that jungle, you get pulled apart pretty quick as a corpse. I mean, there's so many animals, so many bugs. There's nothing left after you after a certain amount of time if you drop dead there.
Yeah, but there's also this idea. I don't know if it's the most popular theory out there, but there are some who believe that Carl would have just abandoned Marcus at some point and then
Hmm.
found his way out, maybe through luck, maybe because he knows a thing or two, but they just don't trust him. There are a lot of people that say Carl's not trustworthy. He's left people out there before.
Right. No, you're totally right. I mean, Carl could have survived. Marcus certainly not, though. I mean, we would have heard from Marcus again if he had gotten out.
And we also go by what Yossi says because Yossi was out there for such a long time
Hmm.
and nearly a month it feels like,
Yeah.
and he almost died. So knowing that Marcos was in a really bad way
Mm.
many days before Yossi got to that point, then it just seems like simple math, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah. Kevin and Yossi, they say they don't regret their decision to go their separate ways, leaving Marcus with Carl. They think later that it's perhaps what saved them in the end. Would they all have perished in the jungle had they stayed together? They'll never know. 10 years after his ordeal, Yossi Ghinsberg returned to Bolivia to the village of San Jose to thank the villagers who helped save him. He came with the goal of developing sustainable tourism to bring revenue to the area and to help the locals.
Yossi Ghinsberg acquired a $1.25 million grant to build a solar powered eco lodge not far from where he became lost all those years ago. Known as Chalalan, the lodge still operates today and is considered to be at the forefront of Bolivian ecotourism. And I've watched some interviews and some talks from Yossi, and it really seems to me like it's like when you set out on a mission or you set out on an adventure, you have your dream idea of where you're going to end up. And with Yossi, he was saying that he believed in the end he would be just like in an Indiana Jones movie. He'd be
Yeah.
hoisting up some sort of found treasure and he'd become famous. But in the end, he found whatever he came out of the jungle with,
Mhm.
which is you have to appreciate what it takes to survive.
Mhm.
And what you survive, it strengthens you. And so he talked about how what you really have aren't riches because those are dreams. What you have is your own fortitude,
Mhm.
your will to
Mhm.
survive, the skills you acquire along the way. It sharpens you and you become a better person for it. And I think when you see that he gets this grant, it's like he had dreams of riches and fame, but in the end, he found that he could be useful.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think that's just a brilliant way to end the story, really.
Yeah.
That's where
I
he
agree.
found himself.
Absolutely, man. He was hoping to build a lot of character, and clearly he did. And his friend Kevin there, I mean, Kevin showed tremendous character in the end as well with his efforts to find Yossi
And even the others.
and the others in the end as well. Yeah, he kept at it. So there's this movie that based on it, right, Aaron? You saw it. I've never seen it. It was in 2017, Jungle with Harry Potter's in it, I think. Or what's his name?
Daniel Radcliffe.
Daniel Radcliffe. There was a
Yeah.
genuine error there. Yeah.
Now, I became interested in the story just reading the description. They have the summary of the movie. And I don't know. It's definitely a movie. If you're into Marooned,
Mm.
I think you should watch the movie because so often we'll recommend a movie because it's tied to our story and people write in and go, that's not a good movie.
Yeah, I
This
know.
is a pretty good movie, I would say. And I don't know that Daniel Radcliffe looks like Yossi because Yossi's so much bigger than he is. But, Daniel Radcliffe's a heck of a good actor. And so
Yeah.
I think he's great in the role. I know why they cast him. You're always looking for that balance of, well, people are going to know this person, but also he can be this person. And it really feels like Daniel Radcliffe spent a lot of time getting to know Yossi so that he could become him for the movie. So, yeah, if you're looking for something to watch and you just heard this episode, put this on your list.
I feel bad for just calling him Harry Potter there. I've heard too that Daniel Radcliffe is a great actor. He's much more than just that role he did as a child. So I'm looking forward to checking it out.
Yeah, shout out to Daniel Radcliffe. No, he's really good. And if you see him in other things, it's easy to get a person linked to one character, you
Totally.
know. But
Yeah,
at the end of the day, he's more than that.
for sure. All right, Aaron. Well, I won't desert you like happened in the story or like last episode, though it sounded like you had fun in my absence. I understand you invited a friend to our camp.
Yeah, I invited Lindsay from Dystopian Simulation Radio. Um, she's someone I've known for a long time.
Mhm.
And so it made it easy just to call her up and say, "Hey, do you want to do an episode with me because I've lost Luna. I don't know where he is." You know?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
she first was like, "Wait a minute, what happened to him?" And I said, "I don't know. He's missing." But I was like, I know Luna, he'll be okay. Like if he gets lost or if he gets taken, whatever happens, he'll
Yeah.
find his way back. But and certainly you did because you're here
Uh,
now.
I did, and everything's fine. Everything's great. Thank you for figuring that out. I was a little jealous, I must admit, but you two sounded like got pretty cozy pretty quick there. No, I'm kidding. She did an excellent job, excellent, and I really enjoyed that episode.
Yeah, it seems like there are people that actually listen to Lindsay's show as well, so they were a bit surprised when they heard her on Marooned. They listened to Dystopian Simulation Radio. It's a very odd show. They cover a lot of strange incidents. It could be UFOs, it could be cryptids, you name it, but they cover a lot
Yeah,
of strange things.
I took a listen. It's really good. She's great, but even though I was a little jealous, and even though I'm not that mad, you're still sleeping on that dirty old couch out there tonight, Aaron.
Well,
I'm
I've slept in a tent with you a few times and yeah, you don't
I,
mind your space. So I'm gonna stay on the dirty couch and now you have to worry about me rolling off the couch and onto the tent. There'll be a tent takedown.
All right, man, my little pup tent over here. All right, I'll keep my head up.
Yeah,
Well,
watch out for those noises.
yes.
What was that? Is that a one-eyed giant sloth coming for me? I don't know. I hope it's just a sloth and not a jaguar.
Yeah, yeah, yes. All right. Well, good night, Aaron.
Good night, Jack. One last note here. I appeared on a show titled Expedition Files recently.
Oh,
So if you're hoping to watch that episode, look up Expedition Files Season 2, Episode 6. I'm in the part of the story where they talk about Michael Rockefeller. So check out Expedition Files. It's on Max and Discovery Plus.
Do you know what's crazy about that, Aaron? I watched that show and I was an episode behind. So I saw you say that you were on the show online, and I would have naturally come across it if it had just been a couple of days later. That would have freaked me out. Yeah, I watched it. You did a great job on that. Yeah, man, I wish I had just saw you like naturally like
Yeah,
that.
that'd have been cool. There's a spoiler there.
Yeah, great job. Great job. Yeah, check it out. Expedition Files. What episode again? Sorry.
It's Season 2, Episode 6.
Yeah, everybody check that out.
It's the very
All right.
last episode of the season, I believe.
Yes. Very cool.